So you say to your friends, I'm just so worried about money. And we say, in those natural responses to where you stand, you are hardly a vibrational match to what you're asking for. And unless you are a vibrational match to what you're asking for, the process of creation cannot be completed. It would be like turning on your radio because your friend tells you that there's something wonderful to hear on 98.6, and you say, this is the thought that I choose to continue to think. This is my habit of thought, or this is my belief, and so I will stay right here. And your friend says, oh, but there is such a delicious thing if you would just adjust your dial just a little bit, and you say, I like it where I am. The receiving mode is a vibrational adjustment that you will come to recognize as you pay attention to the way you feel. When you feel the emotion that you would describe as passion, or exhilaration, or exuberance, or eagerness, or joy, those high-flying, good-feeling emotions always mean that in this moment, there's a strong desire focused within you that you are in this moment a match to. When you feel strong negative emotion, like anger or fear, or strong depression, when you feel strong negative emotion, it always means that there is something very much wanted that is within your vibration, but that the thought that you're thinking right now, and therefore the vibrational countenance that has come in response to it, is a vibrational mismatch to your desire. Because step 3 is so significant to you, and we say that because step 1 just happens. In other words, you can't be a product of a contrasting environment without desire being born within you. Step 2 isn't your work anyway. That's source energy responding to your desire. Your work is about step 3. And it is so much about step 3 that we are calling our work about your step 3. It is the work that you are about, learning little by little to allow the things that you have already decided that you want. The most important thing that you will gather from this day, we're going to tell you right now, and maybe a few hundred more times as we're together. And that is that step 1 is step 1. Step 2 is step 2, and step 3 is step 3. Let's recap. What we are saying to you is, you don't do step 1 and step 3 at the same time. In other words, your emphasis is upon step 3. If you will let your emphasis be upon step 3, everything else will take care of itself. And the reason that that is so important to understand is because when you are in the midst of the contrast that is producing a supersonic desire within you, that desire is like a rocket that shoots out of you in a flash, because the contrast that has produced it is different from the desire that shoots out of you in the flash. So then your work is to bring yourself, every chance you get, into vibrational harmony with your desire. And that's what the art of allowing is really about. It's about feeling yourself through your mood or attitude and deliberately choosing thoughts and feeling them as you choose them until you feel your way into a good feeling place. We'll begin right here.
Hello. My question is about that moment in time when we reach for a higher thought. I've been thinking...
What is a higher thought?
Well, when you say reaching for a better thought.
What is a better thought?
A thought that makes you feel better.
Just wanted to make sure that you know what you're reaching for.
Okay. I've been thinking a lot about that. And I've listened to your teachings for a while now, and you say there's no assertion. And maybe it's my understanding of assertion. And in that moment, it seems it's a very important time for us. And the decision that we make then seems to be an act of will to actually reach for something that's higher. And I think we have a misunderstanding about what actually willpower is. I actually came to the realization that I think willpower is really allowing, and that it's not some sort of assertion.
Willpower is choosing. Willpower is choosing a place of allowing. It's choosing a thought that allows.
Okay.
So you could say willpower is guiding thought.
Right.
Or choosing thought.
Okay. When I first started doing this work, I think work's the wrong word, but when I first started allowing these experiences, I noticed that initially doing that sort of choosing seemed to be hard. And I wondered what that was about.
As you've been moving through your life, you've developed habits of thought, and they have vibrational frequencies. And as you choose them, you have a feeling response to them that is your emotional guidance system, but you've come to refer to that as your mood or attitude. So your mood or attitude is your indicator of the balance of thoughts that you usually run through in a day. So when you're focused upon something, your thought is offering a vibration that really only gives you, by law of attraction, access to other thoughts that are vibrationally quite near it. So your range of vibration is not the gamut all the way from truly disconnected to connected. It's rather a narrow range. So if you're in a sort of unpleasant mood, your range of vibration goes from feeling really frightened to feeling pretty rotten. In other words, that's not a very big range, but it doesn't go from agony to ecstasy. It's like the range on your radio dial or on your CB radio. It's the range that is the range.
Right.
And so, as you stand here in this place where you're really focusing upon something in this moment that causes you to really feel strong negative emotion, and you say, oh, my guidance system is working, I'm feeling negative emotion, even in that awareness, you have diffused the vibration a little bit.
Absolutely.
And as you go further by saying, and I really don't choose to feel this way, it seems that I do feel this way, but I would like to choose a different thought, you've diffused the vibration a little bit more, but you still don't have access to that bright, happy, fluffy thought way over there. In other words, you've changed your range a little bit by your decision to feel better, but you don't have access to all of those thoughts. So as you say, well, I'm going to reach for a better feeling thought, and your desire is to really find a blissful thought, the most pleasant thing that you've ever thought, it's unlikely that you're going to come across it very easily, even if you've been carrying it around in your pocket for a while. In other words, Esther began making mental notes and eventually written notes. We encouraged her to write a notebook full of extraordinary experiences. She had pages of experiences where she remembered feeling exaltation in the middle of them. And she thought, well, she would use those as her touchstone in order to feel better in times when she did not feel so good. But the funny thing about that is you can't even remember those times when you're in the middle of something else, not because you're bad, but because vibrationally you don't have access to it. Mm-hmm. So that's why we say, as you just reach for the best feeling thought you can find, and hold it for as little as 17 seconds, then that better feeling thought becomes your mid-range thought, and then the horrible thought goes out of range and a little bit better feeling thought comes into range. And as you reach for that thought and hold it, and that thought and hold it, and that thought and hold it, before you know it, really within an hour or two, you can be in a whole different vibration.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to get at is, what is that power that decides to reach for the feeling thought? What is that?
Focus. It's the selfish desire, and we mean selfish in the most
but that seems to be
angelic
like some
of words.
sort of assertion, though.
No, it is your selfish desire to feel good. Okay. It's your guidance system surfacing. It's contrast working for you, because whenever you know what you don't want, you know more clearly what you do want. So when you're confused, you want clarity. When you're sick, you want wellness. When there isn't enough of something, you want more of it. In other words, it's this balance of the universe that causes the preference to be focused within you.
But that, to me, seems to be the critical aspect of your teachings, is that in that moment you have that choice. I mean, it seems so critical to me.
Give us more.
Well, like that gentleman just now, he talked about he was living in this basement, and then he came and listened to you, and he suddenly changed something.
But the thing that we want you to understand is that within all of your vibrations, there are a bunch of things happening. You're believing some stuff and you're desiring some stuff, and all of that stuff is called thought, and all of that thought is part of the mix. So all of you have this vibration that is happening that is desiring belief, and desiring belief. So as he was struggling within his life experience, he was shooting out rockets of desire. That's why we call them rockets. They're brief insights that say, I want something different than I'm now living. Right. But they are so brief because your usual vibration is in a different place. But once you launch the rocket, the asking has taken place and the source energy begins to answer. So what happened to him as he came to the gathering and as he sat here for hours like you are all doing today is that little by little we sort of soothed him into his connection. He became more connected, more believing in his own well-being, right. More trusting in well-being, more accepting the perfection of who he was, just for a little bit. And it was enough to make the difference that he allowed just a little more. And he was wise enough that he made the connection between what he wanted, how he felt, how he now felt, and what he allowed. And that's what we're talking about more today than anything. Mm-hmm. As we give endless stories about Jerry and Esther and the way life unfolds for them, the reason that we are offering the majority of the stories is because we want you to realize that it is in their recognizing of what is happening that the true allowing takes place. If you want something and you've forgotten that you've been asking for it, it's been so long since you articulated it, you've sort of given up on it, and then the universe begins to say, come this way, come this way, come this way. And even though sometimes you are following your bliss and going that way, you don't know why you're going that way. You're missing all of the delicious signposts along the way that are evidence of the success that is coming to you. But when you have just that morning talked about what you want and why you want it, and then the universe says, come this way, and you get the impulse and you follow it and you receive a little breakthrough, you can feel, I'm onto something. I'm sniffing it out. I can feel it happening. And that's when deliberate creation really becomes satisfying.
Right.
That's the way you intended for it to be.
So many, teachers, when they talk about this, other teachers, they talk about this moment when suddenly everything dropped. I remember you talking about Jerry. He just said, okay, I'm letting go. And it seems to be that is the crux of being human. It's just like this allowing the allowing. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like everyone that ever had a peak experience or just, it was all about just opening up to that moment that was already there anyway.
So sometimes out of exhaustion, you just torture yourself into allowing. That's one way to go.
That's certainly one way. It wouldn't be the way I'd choose.
Sometimes through stimulation of someone who is so connected and you're sort of trapped in your chair, right. And it's embarrassing to get up and leave. Right. And so you just sit and you listen to the rampage that goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Sometimes you can find a greater place of allowing. Right. Most of you have to die to get it. In other words, we didn't want to upset you. When you make that transition, when you release that consciousness, you always reemerge back into that pure, powerful energy. But what we are all talking about and what you are talking about is, how do I vibrate in a way that allows it here? And we say, you just got to practice. But the motivation that must be there before you're even willing to do the practice is you have to be selfishly oriented. You have to be so selfishly oriented that you really want to feel good. Have you ever been with someone and as you start a conversation, you can just see by the look on their face that they don't want to go there. They're hoping you don't go there. Sometimes they're bold enough to say, please don't go there. Those are powerful teachers because what they're saying to you is, I've been there before. I didn't like it when I was there. Let's not activate this and ruin this moment. So if we were standing in your physical shoes, that's the way we would approach this. We would begin to discover that just like there's food that pleases me and food that doesn't, and there's water temperature that pleases me and water temperature that doesn't, there are thoughts that please me more and thoughts that please me less. But it is not until you realize that you have control within this environment that you are willing to be the chooser. And that's why, as we began expressing through Esther, we called this the science of deliberate creation, because we wanted you to begin to recognize that you have the power to choose. And then later, as we watched you working so hard in your choices, we began saying, well, don't choose quite so hard and just chill out and relax a little bit. And now you're helping us to integrate the two all over again, aren't you? Creation is about focusing. And so why would you come into these bodies to begin with? In other words, source energy is in a very blissful place. Source energy is that heavenly place that you're all going to eventually croak and reemerge back to. So what's the point of physical experience? If it's perfect in the non-physical, you come forth in the physical and you suffer for a while and you create some stuff and then you reemerge back into the perfect place. In other words, what's the point? Why not just stay in non-physical where there's no resistance, where it feels perfect all the time? And we say the reason that you come forth is because there is so much excitement and so much stimulation in getting to mold the energy.